Tracy Scott, Councillor, Chair, and also I'd like to acknowledge and welcome Nigel Ingram, our new appointed Group Manager for Recreation and Cultural Services. So welcome Nigel to Timaru, welcome to Timaru District Council. First time show, so just bear with us team. So first of all, I'm going to hand it over to Nigel. He's just got a couple of formalities he'd like to talk about and then we'll get straight into the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also welcome to the Mayor and Councillors and any community board members who may be here, media and members of the public. There is an item of public excluded on the agenda, item 9.1, and when we come to that matter in the agenda as we work through it, we'll explain a minor change to the section in relation to why the public is being excluded.
Thank you. Okay, so any apologies? None. Identification of items of urgent business? None that I'm aware of. Identification of matters of minor nature? Not that I'm aware of. Declaration of conflicts of interest? None. Chairperson's report? Noted, following Councillor Parker, I will also have a chairperson's report for next month once I duly get out and about in my chair's role as Community Services Chair. So now just moving straight to reports. 6.1, extension of loan offer to Fraser Park Community Trust. I'd just like to welcome Grant Hamill and Beth to talk to this paper, please.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I forgot. I will continue my declaration of interest that I had with the Fraser Park from the prior meeting.
Perfect. Thanks, Councillor Pye.
I'll do so. Thank you. So just to give a very brief overview of the position, as you're aware, Fraser Park is seeking a major redevelopment, and a year ago this committee actually authorised a loan of $1 million for either a 5 or 10 year plan. Now this was advised to the Fraser Park Trust and also with advice that they had a year to take up the loan. It expired on 12 October 2022, which is exactly a year from the date that the decision was made. Now, there was a meeting, I think it was the 27th of October, where further additional funds have been granted to the Fraser Park Community Trust, with that, we just identified that they also still require the loan, but the loan by then had actually expired. They had been advised of this, but it hadn't been raised. So this is, I suppose, a formality for the committee to consider whether the loan can now be extended for a period of 12 months to 12 October 2023.
Thanks, Grant. Do we have any questions? Councillor Burt?
No questions. It's very apparent why they're doing it, and they've given us an indication that they still require it. In addition to the funding that we approved, and I'm happy to move that we give them an extension to the drawdown of that loan.
Any further questions?
Look, just happy to second it, Councillor Scott. I think it's important to the overall funding, so it's imperative that they retain that funding.
Any further questions? Okay, so the recommendation is that the committee approves an extension for the drawdown of the loan offer to the Fraser Park Community Trust for its development of Fraser Park for a further 12 months from the date of the meeting and on the same terms and conditions on which the original loan was offered. It has been moved by Councillor Burt and seconded by Mayor Nigel Bowen. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Okay, so next item is to consideration of urgent business items. I call for any of those. No, I call for any considerations of minor nature matters. None. Okay, so it is now time that we move into public excluded. I move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely item 9.1, the general subject of each matter to be considered while the public is excluded, the reason for passing this resolution in relation to each matter, and the specific grounds under section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information Meetings Act of 1987 for the passings of this resolutions are as follows. General subject of each matter to be considered, donations and loans, subcommittee recommendations for funding. This is in accordance with section 48(1) of the Act. The reason for passing this resolution in relation to each matter, section 7(2)(b)(2) to protect the commercial position of the applicants. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Burt, seconder, Mayor Nigel. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed at 12:31.
Probably best that it was wasted. Okay, so moving along, I'd like to call for apologies, and we have none. I have no indication of matters of an urgent nature or a minor nature. Conflicts of interest, do we have any conflicts of interest in relation to any of the matters here before us today? No. Chairman's report, since the last meeting I've attended a number of workshops, extraordinary council meeting and our inaugural very, very special meeting of the new term. Attended some induction programs, notably the LGNZ talk from our two gentlemen, including Mr. Lawrence Yole. Also, the very important LGNZ presentation to us that is very important to our district and us as councillors. I met with the Drama League around the presentation for the Theatre and Cultural Centre. Also met with staff and also attended the reception for the Governor-General. I'll move those. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Oliver. All those in favour? Against, so carried. So moving on to our reports, and we're going to start with our report in relation to the investment and borrowings. This is a standard quarterly report, and basically it's something that you would have had as councillors, hopefully been involved in some input from the induction. So thank you, Azora. I'll, without any further ado, ask you to present that.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to report on the quarterly council investments and borrowings. I guess we continue to have a close eye on the interest rates fluctuations, and we have continued on a really good basis to make some profits in our swaps, as you can read. I just want to update in terms of the in terms of the financial strategy. We have now remained within the 2.1, and we continue on 146 for the end of the quarter. Our total debt is at the end of the quarter 179.5 mil, and we've got the net debt at 149 mil. In terms of the continuous investments, we are at 31 mil. I do want to note that the November projections are that we will use up some more of those fundings as the capital expenditure program increases. And also we continue to have the weighted average cost of funds at a really good rate as well. So basically we are 70% roughly on fixed term, which is really good in terms of where we're progressing. I just want to note one minor note on the report. It's 71 million is the total interest rate swaps, and this is 0.8 of the report, so it currently reads as 81 mil, but just want to note that it's 71 mil for the quarter. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Azora, and put it to the floor open for any questions. I look to my left.
Yeah, Azora, look, I'm just looking at the graph on page 1 showing our interest rate and our borrowings forecast debt. It used to have a flat line. Now it's got this line that's heading up to 300 million. Page 12, is it? So I guess that is way past our debt level, which is 2.1 or 2.1 times, which is income, which is 100 million times 2.1, 210 million, correct? But showing shortly we are going to be going past through 200, and at present caps 2.1, and the local government debt ratio is 2.8, so we are actually right up there, and that's based on our current income. Now, if we lose 25% of our income, this is going to look quite different, isn't it? Because we can only borrow up to 2.8 times $75 million. So we're actually way out here in regards to our debt and our forecast debt. How do you equate that? I mean, we are actually going to be living. When I first came here 3 years ago, we had around 47 million debt. Here we are now at 149 and climbing rapidly. So I guess I'm concerned about.
Can you get to your question, Councillor Byrne?
Well,
yes.
what are we going to do with our debt level here? Are we going to have to go part through our cap? We'll have to.
So without, it's a sort of a question, I'm happy. You've got to realise, and I keep reiterating this, and we've said it 1,000 times, if we lose what you're alluding to, is our Three Waters, the debt goes with it. That'll have a massive impact in relation to that. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that I've never seen you anything other than be positive and agree to many of these projects that we're doing, which obviously accumulate to where you're going. But I'll pass over to Azora for comment in relation to that, unless...
Yeah, I'll just make a couple of comments. So at the moment, you're right. So 2.1 is the agreed threshold. 2.8 is the LGFA threshold that we have a cap on. We're currently at 146%. That's consistent with the LTP. Our borrowings are growing as we deliver more and more capital programs. And so a lot of your comment is correct in terms of the growth of the debt. Our debt caps at present, in terms of current projects on the books, are not at risk. We'll talk about that within the annual plan report, which we've got coming up in a couple of papers as well. But we're currently sitting at that 146% level.
And so through to you, Chair, just on the next report that we will talk about, just to highlight that there is a forecasting process in place as well. And that will also cover off the current debt and requirements for the future.
Thank you. I believe Kai Whakahari would like to add to that.
Oh, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. If you look at our long-term plan, we borrow our cap of 2.1 times our revenue. So, and without going into the detail, at year 10 we have operating revenue of circa 140 or 145 million dollars. 2.1 of that takes you to 300 million of gross debt. We subtract from that our net debt, which normally sits at about 30 to 40 million dollars, depending on where we are and our cash flow, Katahi claims, rates, and so on. So if you look at that, I think, and as we set out in our long-term plan, we would go right to our 2.1 cap. But I think that plan there shows you that we remain inside it as we projected in the long-term plan, but only just, and that was always forecast. So I'm not sure, but I don't think that forecasts any breach of the cap, but as set out in the long-term plan, it does indicate that we will go right up to that limit, self-imposed, of 2.1.
Did you mention 141 million income?
Through you, Mr Chair, I'd have to look, but in the long-term plan, year 10, our total operating revenue, I think, is in the order of 140 to 145 million, but I need to check the number.
So based on the current numbers, our rates will be going from 60 million up to 100 million. And that would obviously need to include the fact the potential loss of 25% of our income, which is actually something we should be considering right now, because there's a lot on the go, a lot of projects, and there's no point having a whole lot of stuff here when potentially it's not going to happen.
So in the long-term plan, one of the assumptions made was that the business would carry on as it was. So although the Three Waters assets and the accompanying revenue has been well and truly heralded, that the current government's policy is to see that separated from councils, the assumption in the long-term plan was that in actual fact it would stay. When you come to do the next long-term plan, if the current policy remains and councils through LGNZ, through Taituara, which is the Society of Local Governments sort of policy body, are going to have to exercise their mind quite considerably because they will be priorities and decisions that have to be made regarding what happens if you lose your water assets and you lose the accompanying revenue, which at the moment is in the order of about $25 million. So, you know, they are real, and that will have an effect of 25 times 2.1 on current dollars, which is, you know, sort of a bit over $50 million worth of debt serviceability.
Right, moving along. Thank you very much for that. Mayor Bowen.
Sorry, could I just make a comment? We have discussed this, and not all councils will be the same, but relative to the infrastructure that's associated with Three Waters, our debt aligned to it, and also the income, it actually fits within buckets that align. So if that is to move, it will have less of an effect, I believe, on us than some other councils where they might have a higher level of debt associated with one part of their business or organisation, whereas we are actually relatively aligned. So I understand the risk, but it's not there, and we have discussed this sometimes. Yeah. And I am happy to move it.
Okay, we have a mover for the paper. Do we have any further discussion? Councillor Parker, seconded. Any further discussion in relation to that? All those in favour? Against? So carried. Thank you. Moving to 6.2 on page 18. Bear with me.
Thank you, and this is a quarterly report on the financial performance as at end of September. Again, a very strong balance sheet, and the results remain well within the forecasted measures and the KPIs as well. And I just want to highlight again just a minor change in point 5. The overall, as a result of the interest rate swaps, the P&L surplus is actually 1.2 mil compared to 62,000. That's on the report, as per the attached notes. And also the favourable variance is 1.2 mil for the quarter ended 30th of September. Just to mention also that we're tracking slightly lower in expenses and also higher in revenue, and that leaves us approximately 25% of the yearly budget. So that's well within the trackability of the forecast. Also want to mention that the forecast for the quarter will be commencing in the next month, and this is in line with the next report that's coming, which is the annual plan projections that will follow further. So there will be a number of updates that will come through and presented at the next quarter, obviously in line with all of the changes to interest rates as well as inflation that we'll talk about shortly in the next report. And just in terms of the capital expenses and spend, we are tracking lower than forecasted for the first quarter. However, noting back to my comment earlier on the borrowings, we remain on track and investing those borrowings back into the term deposits and to ensure that we're ready for the higher spend that's projected for the last quarter. And happy to take any questions.
I've just got a couple of comments, just following on from Azura's point. I think one of the key things that we do, sort of the first 3 months, we report actual against budget. Then after that, there's a whole lot of timing differences. So when you read through a lot of the analysis here, there's timing differences in terms of when funding was expected to be received and when it's actually received. So what we do is a detailed forecast, and going forward, we actually report against the budget, but also the forecast becomes much more a number that we're tracking towards, because it takes into account all those things in terms of timing variances which have moved. So I think it is worth taking into account that next couple of months will be going against forecast as well.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Pye?
Thank you. I just wondered if you could help me understand what's going on in waste minimisation. When I had a look at the figures, it appears that the fees are down kind of circa 200,000, and 100,000 of that is releases, which is due to the change of contract, and will that continue on for the rest of the year? In addition to that, our expenses are up around 500,000, which to me is a difference in waste minimisation of about 721,000, which if that carries on for the rest of the year, does that mean that we're going to be out by 3 million by the end of the year, or is there something else going on in there that I haven't understood? And also the capital's quite down as favourable at the moment, so just wonder if you could explain some of that to me, please.
Yeah, so there is a difference in the waste minimisation, mainly due to the change in the contractors, and therefore when the budgets were prepared, the entire amounts weren't correctly allocated between them. So in the next forecast, the intention is for that to be updated as part of the update. In terms of so there's a couple of key components driving that. Obviously the carbon credits, which were going for auction in December. And so once those results come out, we will be able to better reflect it. So the below favourable, unfavourable variances really is a timing difference, because those will be applied after the auctions and the actuals come through, and then that will be through to the area. In terms of the revenue component, there is a difference currently that the waste minimisation team is working through, and that's to do with the fees. I don't know whether Andrew Dixon might want to comment any further in terms of the waste fees that are being looked at.
I think the key here is there's been a change in contract, and so the way that we now run waste minimisation is very different from what it was in the long-term plan. So we'd assumed a certain structure, and so that has changed. Some of the numbers coming through are, I guess, timing differences in terms of how they've changed. There is, I believe, an issue with the revenue number in terms of one aspect of that I don't think is going to be received, but Andrew might have some further information on that.
If I may, Mr Chair, I guess my main concern is, and it will be interesting when we see that update in the next report, is that if this continues, we're going to have quite a major problem in this area.
And I guess that's the benefit of the forecast, so we can take into account new information and what we think is going to happen in the next 9 months of this year.
Great.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Pye. Any further questions, Councillor Booth? Karen.
Yeah, look, Azura, your budget numbers in there where we had a 1.2 surplus, but then it came down to 886,000. Does that include your depreciation? Is that worked in? Is that included in there, as in your allowance for depreciation?
Yes, the surplus, you mean if it includes depreciation?
Well, we accumulate roughly 15% depreciation on our...
Yes, correct.
Okay, so I assume out of that 26 million, that the total expenses in there, 25 million, includes the proportion of depreciation that should be applied.
So the total surplus does include depreciation?
Yeah, the total
Yes, it
depreciation
does.
costs of $6 million, $6.3 million after the 3 months. So yes, it does include depreciation.
Okay, and I guess the other question was just around the bins. Do we no longer own the bins? Did they go cross in the contract?
No, we still own the bins, yeah, and they are.
We don't get an income from them.
Well, we get income through the rates of the actual collection of them, yeah, and if people want new bins, they have to pay for those, so yeah. And we are depreciating those bins as well. But a lot of the bins have actually gone beyond the original expected useful life, so there've been, a lot of them have been written off, so to speak, in regard to depreciation.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Someone would like to move that we receive and note that paper. Thank you, Councillor Parker, seconded, Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Moving on to the preparation of the annual plan on page 33. Obviously there's a number of financial challenges that is in significant variations on year 3. So with no decisions to be made here today, but it's just about making you alive to these challenges. And so with that, I'll call Zora or Mark to present that to us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the Chair identified, I guess the purpose of this report is to give you a bit of a heads up about the preparation requirements and potential impacts for the annual plan 23-24. So those recommendations focus around the requirements and the overall timetable, our base assumptions that we have identified at this point, and the potential changes and variations that might apply to this plan and the impact of those on for year 3 of the long-term plan. So it's largely an exercise based on exceptions to the relevant year. It's not an opportunity to relitigate the long-term plan. But in terms of the LGA, if there are significant or material issues that come out, there are some requirements that we're required to work through for the consultation purposes. So the plan does, the report does identify the assumptions. You'll note that one of those is in relation to the Burl adjusters. So the Burl adjusters are given to us every year and essentially, I guess, set out the impact of inflation. And they have changed from what was originally forecast. And there's also a number of potentially significant variations that have been outlined in section 13. And obviously, as you work through the process, then we will get an understanding of how that impacts on the plan as itself. So in terms of what we're seeing at the moment, those combined in terms of the whole process, we do think that it is likely to lead to a need for consultation under the LGA when we get to that point, depending, I guess, on the decisions that you work through once we start going through the process. I'll pass on to Azora to make any comment.
Thanks, Mark. I think Mark's covered the high level quite well. I just want to point out that if we were to continue with the entire work program as it stands in the LTP, including the inflation's high level modelling indicates that we will be sort of at the 2.7 limit. So the headroom over the 10-year period will be quite close to the, I guess, the LGFA limit. And also we've mentioned in there the current situation would look around 7.5 to 8.5, and that is given that we include everything, carry on, and then also add all of the bill factors provided at this point in time. Therefore, as Mark pointed out, most likely we'll be reviewing it in quite a lot of detail and then coming back with some options on what might need delaying and so on and so forth.
Excellent. So we have some questions. Councillor Piddington.
Yeah, look, I'm just really concerned on point 22 and 23, really. The talk of a rates rise 7.5 to 8.5. If we did that, it would be 3.6% over our agreed 4.9%, which would be a massive increase. And I wouldn't think we'd want to go anywhere near 2.77 when legislatively we're 2.8%. So what that means is some of those things on our list of projects will likely to have to come off, or we've got to increase our rates greatly. So I think we need to have some real rigorous discussions about those things on the list above, because if they all add up to a 3.6% rate increase and lifting our debt level, because if we get to 2.77, it gives us no flexibility going forward, does it? So, you know, your likes of the gallery, the library going forward will just be gone because we can't, am I right, go above 2.8?
Absolutely.
Yes, that's dead right. And look, I don't want to use the word unprecedented, but we're in difficult times. And so what we've tried to do with this report is normally we would bring a report talking about this is the approach to the annual plan, these are the timelines, but we chose to put some more information in there, which is these are the challenges that we're actually facing as a council. They are significant, and Councillor Pudding, you're dead right, and we put that paragraph in there to show if we do everything that we have already in the third year, that is what it looks like. And so the challenge, I guess, as council and councillors is, yeah, how do we approach that and what do we do? So those are the things that we're keen to have a discussion around.
Yeah, in short, we have to cut our cloth when the time comes, and you're correct, we have some significant challenges and discussions to have with this council in relation to that. So, Councillor Pye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This kind of does go back a little bit to what Councillor Booth was alluding to, but especially as a new councillor, when we're being asked to approve a lot of this work, especially my understanding is around the theatre and that in December, and consider this long-term plan, is it possible to do some modelling of what it will look like without the three waters? Because I feel that that will make quite a significant, you know, it's a significant piece of information that we need when making these decisions, because the future, we could make this decision and then the future could look very different in a hurry, and I would like to have some guidance on what that future might look like when we make the decision.
Yes, pass to you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and that's really the sort of the ultimate question about what it looks like. So the modelling we could do would be very, very high level. Very high level. It would be, you would be able to drive a bus through it, I'll put that now, because we can take out, we've got 25 million of revenue, roughly, I'm looking at Mr. Dixon here, we have sort of in the order of 600 million of assets, roughly, give or take. Then the key question is what debt will accompany the transfer of those assets, and that's until we see the legislation and we understand and we work it through, that really, I think, and I'm looking at my colleagues here, I think that really is the issue. Now, we could do some nominal, very high level, but boy, it would be something that would have to be heavily caveated because we have no idea. Now, we are advised that debt will travel with the assets, and we have some ability to identify it, but of course we have to persuade the new entities that they should be taking it on, and that's where, until we see the legislation, we're not sure. But I'm looking here, we could give it a go, but I think as those of us in finance would be really concerned about the caveats of it, because it's really, I think, the debt, what it does to overhead in terms of our absorption of overhead costings. Could I confer with my colleagues about what could be done, but it would be high level and macro. I don't know, Jason may want to talk. It would be challenging and problematic.
Yes, it is challenging. Look, one of the things we're going to do over the next couple of months is as staff work through the drivers, where their cost pressures are, and so we'll build the full model. Then in February we'll have workshops with councillors where we spend more time than a 10-minute report discussing what all the key things are. And so the intent of that workshop in February is almost to be able to go, what if we have one of this and one of this and one of this, and what does it do to our debt, to our rates and those things, so councillors can engage in making some decisions with information and models around that. So that's the purpose of coming back in February with some of that information.
Member.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I think the concern, and it's one that rightly justified, I think, is that, new councils are making a decision on the theatre museum specifically, which is significant money, and normally we would make these decisions aligned with financial strategy, which is, long-term plan time, and I understand the concerns, and they are just, and it's how we give enough information to those individuals. And Councillor Piddington's, highlighted, and he's done so on a number of times, rightly so as well, the consideration for other projects, and that's the key thing. And I think we probably just need enough information at that time we were making a decision around theatre, that we know what future decisions we may or might not have to make around some of those capital projects, and that's across all of the business, both vertical and horizontal in regard to infrastructure, because some of the things have been highlighted here, but there's other elements that aren't highlighted, such as water metering, and what are some of the things that we can push back, what are all those implications on rates, etc. So it is quite complex, but I understand, and I think the questions are right to be asked.
Councillor Piddington.
Yeah, just on that too, I mean, when you see those numbers and those significant increases in either rates or lending, and I've been challenged a couple of times, how the theatre and the heritage project can only add $17 a year. I need some rigour around the answers to that, because at $17 a ratepayer, that brings an income of about 400k. So how can you borrow? What's the number we're borrowing back to end up at $17? Because to me, at 10%, it's 4 million. So it's 8 million there. So I mean, not here and now, but we need some real rigour around those numbers before we make decisions whether we spend 30, 40 or 60 million. And right now, I don't think we've got it. I don't expect the numbers now.
No, and that's completely fine. So Azura and I are working on a model which is able to be really clearly understood and articulated, which responds to that particular question. Because I think councillors need to understand that very clearly in order to understand and therefore make decisions. So that has been worked on, not here and now, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Councillor Piddington. Thanks, Jason. Yes, back to you, Ben.
Through you, Mr Chair, can I just ask to Councillor Pye's question, which is an excellent question because it's something we're grappling with, is the sort of the permutations that we could run and the options. But I think, if I'm correct, at a very broad level, it will be the level of debt that gets transferred with the assets that will be significant in terms of our ability to what we can fund going forward. And that's really the unknown part at this point. And as I understand, from what I know, there will be plenty of other complications around overhead and so on, but that will be a material number, and I think it's for us to try and do some options, but it would be very high level.
I think it's just confirmation of the fact that that debt associated with those assets is lined up to the income and is it relative to the rest of the organisation's debt and income, and I don't know, it might not be as bad as we think. So I would imagine we've got quite a lot of debt in Three Waters infrastructure at this moment in time because of Parramatta Pipeline and other things, but I guess it would be of benefit to know exactly where we sit.
And it's a moving feast in terms of what the government's tinkering with already and talking about issuing shares and all that sort of thing. Where do they fit on our bottom line and how that fits and things like that. But we'll just need as high level as possible, and it's a very good question because, as I started out saying, there are some significant challenges there. We need to be alive to them, and we've got some big discussions ahead of us. Councillor Booth.
Chief Executive, you alluded to the 600 million assets. Really, that doesn't mean anything. It's actually the income that dictates what debt, what you can do. So I guess in previous discussions we've had, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but he suggested our debt in Three Waters was around 60 million. So we're 150, so there's 90 million balance left over. So just to
a rough number now. We've gone, when I first came here, we were around 50 million, we're up to 150, 100 million. So what have we actually, the majority of that 100 million that we've taken on in the last 3 years, if you put that into 3 or 4 bunch or groups, whereabouts has it gone?
Look, these are all searching questions, but and like I'd like to reiterate here now, some of these, sometimes they do pop up and everything, but these are questions, I think, all of them, and we've asked some very, very good questions here, and that's another one as well. We note it, we put it in here, and we want that back as soon as possible in relation to actually having some time and effort to answer these things appropriately. Are you happy with that, Councillor Booth?
Well, I'd like to see a counter budget based around loss, and that's a bottom line. We need to know that ASAP. Next time we come back to this.
Thank you.
To this.
Councillor Booth, thank you.
Sorry, one final. I would like to challenge the governance team here, though, today, that you need to be over these things. If you're not sure of what $100 million worth of debt that you've just been signing off with budgets for the last 3 years, I do question why you're even around the table.
I don't know if you actually do, Nigel.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's a hell of a lot of money, and it's the first time I've seen that graph go like that. It's always been flat.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any further discussion? I think again, this was about giving you some sort of idea of the challenges and what have you. I think with that, I'll move it. Someone like to second it? Councillor Pye, all those in favour? Against? So carried. So there's no other business of minor or a major nature, and so I will call the meeting to a finish at 7 minutes past 1. Thank you very much.